What if the ability to control people was less about brute force and more about subtle influence? Machiavelli, the master strategist of political power, believed that manipulation wasn't evil, it was necessary for survival and success. In a world where trust can be a weakness and emotions can be exploited, Machiavelli's principles offer a chilling but powerful guide to navigating relationships, business, and even politics. But here's the catch: true manipulation is invisible. It works behind the scenes, influencing decisions without raising suspicion. Imagine controlling a negotiation without uttering a direct demand, or making others willingly follow your lead without realizing it. Machiavelli's timeless wisdom teaches us to anticipate human behavior, control emotions, and use perception as a weapon. But is it ethical to apply these tactics in today's world? And where is the fine line between influence and deception? In this video, we'll explore Machiavelli's hidden strategies of manipulation, understand how to control people without force, and uncover how these principles apply to modern life. Prepare to dive into the dark, yet fascinating world of psychological control, where power lies not in strength but in the mind. Imagine walking into a room where everyone immediately respects you without knowing anything about you. Why does this happen? It's not about who you truly are, it's about how others perceive you. In a world where perception often trumps reality, controlling how others see you is one of the most powerful forms of influence. Machiavelli believed that people rarely look beyond appearances. He famously wrote, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand." This means people form opinions based on what they see, not what they know. Think about job interviews. Two equally qualified candidates walk in, only looks confident, well-dressed, and composed, while the other appears nervous and unsure. Who gets the job? More often than not, the confident candidate wins, even if their skills are identical. This is the power of perception in action. You can control how people see you by carefully managing your appearance, body language, and tone. Machiavelli's strategy involves creating an aura of competence and authority while concealing weaknesses. If you want others to follow you, project confidence even when you're uncertain. Speak less and listen more to create an air of mystery. People are drawn to those who seem composed and in control. By mastering the art of perception, you can make others believe in your abilities before they even see results. But perception isn't just about looking powerful, it's also about aligning your image with the expectations of those around you. If you want to be seen as trustworthy, act consistently with integrity. If you want to be viewed as a leader, carry yourself with authority and decisiveness. Perception is a crafted illusion that, when handled correctly, can make people willingly hand over their trust and power. However, controlling perception is only the first step. To maintain control, you must also keep people divided and distracted. This leads us to the next Machiavellian principle: divide and rule. How to maintain control by creating conflict. By keeping people in conflict, you ensure that their focus remains scattered, preventing them from challenging your authority. Let's dive deeper into how this tactic can be used to solidify control and eliminate threats. Have you ever wondered why some leaders seem untouchable, even when surrounded by chaos? The secret lies in a cunning yet effective strategy: divide and rule. Machiavelli understood that unity is dangerous to those in power. When people unite under a common cause, they become stronger and harder to control. But when they're divided, distracted by internal conflicts and petty rivalries, they lose the ability to challenge authority. Consider a modern office environment. Imagine two departments constantly competing for recognition and resources. They're so focused on outperforming each other that they never question the leadership's decisions. As long as they remain divided, the boss maintains total control. This is precisely how Machiavelli's divide and rule works, keeping people too busy fighting among themselves to realize who's truly in charge. Machiavelli advised rulers to create mistrust, suspicion, and rivalry between groups, ensuring that they remain fragmented by fostering minor disagreements and inflating trivial issues. Leaders can prevent unity. For instance, in politics, rival parties often spend more time attacking each other than addressing the real issues. This keeps the public divided and the ruling powers secure. In personal relationships, this principle can also be observed. Picture a manipulative friend who spreads subtle rumors, making their friends doubt and distrust each other. As long as the group remains fragmented, that individual maintains control over the situation. The result: people too preoccupied with their internal battles fail to recognize who's pulling the strings. But why does division work so well? When people are emotionally invested in conflict, they become distracted. Their focus shifts from challenging authority to defending their own position. Leaders who understand this can manipulate emotions and loyalties to maintain dominance without ever appearing authoritarian. However, division alone isn't enough to guarantee long-term control. To strengthen their grip, leaders must also master the art of deception. Why lies are more useful than truth. Lies can shape perceptions, alter realities, and create narratives that serve those in power. Up next, we'll explore how deception becomes a weapon in the hands of those who seek to manipulate and control. What if I told you that a well-placed lie can open more doors than the truth? This unsettling reality lies at the heart of Machiavelli's philosophy. While truth can be inconvenient and limiting, lies offer flexibility, control, and power. They allow manipulators to shape perceptions, create illusions, and direct people's behavior without them ever realizing it. Consider a salesperson trying to close a deal. Instead of highlighting the flaws in their product, they emphasize its best features, downplaying any negatives. The buyer, influenced by the carefully crafted narrative, makes a decision based on incomplete information. The lie creates an illusion of value, leading to a successful sale. This tactic is not just confined to business, it's everywhere. Politicians craft half-truths to win public favor. Advertisers paint unrealistic pictures to lure consumers. And individuals often present idealized versions of themselves on social media to gain approval. Machiavelli believed that those in power should master the art of deception. A ruler who relies solely on honesty risks being outmaneuvered by those willing to manipulate the truth. Lies can be used to discredit opponents, instill false hope, or create a perception of stability where chaos reigns. And since most people prefer comforting illusions over harsh realities, deception becomes a powerful weapon. But deception isn't just about telling outright lies. It's about creating narratives that guide emotions and decisions. A leader can exaggerate threats to unite people or spread misinformation to weaken opposition. In the end, those who control the narrative control the masses. However, deception alone isn't enough. To fully manipulate and control, one must also leverage emotions like fear, guilt, and desire. Up next, we'll dive into how emotions become the ultimate tools for bending people's will to your advantage. What if I told you that controlling emotions is more powerful than controlling actions? Machiavelli understood that to truly manipulate and control people, you don't need brute force, you need to master their emotions. Fear, guilt, and desire are the invisible strings that, when pulled correctly, can make people act against their own interests without realizing it. Imagine a boss who instills fear in their employees. The constant threat of being fired or humiliated makes them work harder, stay longer, and never question authority. Fear paralyzes rational thought, making people more obedient and less likely to challenge the status quo. Leaders throughout history have used fear to suppress dissent and maintain power. Guilt, on the other hand, is a subtler but equally effective tool. Parents use guilt to make their children behave. Friends use it to extract favors, and partners use it to manipulate emotions. When people feel guilty, they are more likely to comply, apologize, or make amends even when they aren't at fault. A skilled manipulator knows how to weaponize guilt to extract loyalty and submission. Then there's desire, the most potent emotional driver. People crave love, success, recognition, and security. By dangling what someone deeply desires just out of reach, manipulators can lead them wherever they want. Advertisers promise happiness with a product, politicians promise change, and influencers promise a better life, all fueled by the human desire for something more. When you control emotions, you don't need to force actions. People willingly hand over their control. But there's another underrated weapon in the arsenal of manipulation: silence. Up next, we'll explore why saying less often gives you more power and control. What if your greatest weapon in a conversation wasn't what you said but what you didn't say? Silence is a tool often overlooked, but in the hands of a master manipulator, it can be more powerful than words. Machiavelli believed that controlling the narrative doesn't always mean dominating the conversation. Sometimes, the less you speak, the more control you gain. Consider this: during negotiations, the person who talks the most usually reveals their position, their weaknesses, and their desires, but the person who remains silent holds the power. Silence creates discomfort, and in that discomfort, the other person often rushes to fill the void, revealing more than they intended. This technique is used by skilled negotiators, interrogators, and even therapists to get people to open up without realizing it. Silence can also be a form of psychological dominance. Think about a boss who responds to a proposal with silence. The absence of immediate feedback leaves the employee anxious, eager to please, and more willing to compromise. Silence forces the other person to interpret and guess, giving the silent party the upper hand. In everyday life, silence can be used to convey disapproval, shift power dynamics, and maintain an aura of mystery. People are naturally drawn to those who don't reveal everything, making them more curious, more attentive, and more easily influenced. But silence isn't just about withholding words, it's about creating space for the other person to expose themselves. And once they do, you can subtly guide their emotions and decisions. This is where the real game begins: manipulating loyalty and making people dependent on you. Let's explore how keeping others emotionally tied to you strengthens your control. What if loyalty wasn't earned through trust but engineered through dependence? One of the most subtle yet powerful ways to control people is by making them feel they can't function without you. Machiavelli understood that true loyalty isn't built on genuine affection, it's rooted in fear of losing the benefits you provide. Imagine a manager who always gives their team just enough resources to succeed but never enough to be fully independent. Employees feel grateful for the support, but they remain reliant on the manager to navigate challenges. The result? Their loyalty is not to the company but to the person who holds the key to their success. Similarly, in relationships, people who constantly solve their partner's problems create emotional dependency. Over time, The partner becomes so accustomed to this support that they fear losing it, mistaking reliance for love. To manipulate loyalty, you must become indispensable, offer solutions, resources, or emotional support that people crave but ensure they never learn how to get it without you. This breeds a subtle but powerful sense of obligation. They may not even realize that their loyalty isn't voluntary, it's a survival mechanism tied to their dependence. The key is to balance generosity with control. Give just enough to make them feel valued, but never enough for them to outgrow your influence. Create situations where people feel they owe you something, and they will remain loyal not out of love, but out of necessity. But loyalty alone isn't enough. To secure long-term control, you must also wield strategic kindness, an approach where calculated generosity keeps people emotionally tied to you. Let's explore how giving just enough can create a web of gratitude and obligation that keeps others firmly within your grasp. Is kindness always selfless, or can it be a tool to maintain control? In the world of power and influence, generosity isn't just about being good-hearted, it's about being strategic. Machiavelli believed that calculated acts of kindness create invisible chains of obligation, making people feel indebted long after the favor is forgotten. Consider a wealthy businessman who helps a struggling entrepreneur by giving them capital to start their business. At first, the gesture seems purely altruistic, but over time, the entrepreneur feels obligated to the businessman, consulting him on key decisions and prioritizing his advice. The kindness wasn't just a gesture, it was an investment in long-term control. Similarly, in relationships, people who consistently go out of their way to help others often find themselves in a position of influence. The recipient feels a subtle sense of debt, creating an unspoken agreement to remain loyal. Strategic kindness works because it creates emotional leverage. When someone receives a favor, they feel compelled to reciprocate even if the repayment isn't immediate. Over time, this obligation deepens, creating a psychological contract where the giver maintains subtle but lasting control. The key is to be generous enough to create loyalty, but not so generous that the recipient feels they can break free. To master this art, you must choose when and where to extend kindness, ensuring that the recipient sees you as indispensable. Offer assistance at critical moments, making your help feel like a lifeline. When done correctly, this calculated generosity makes people emotionally invested in your success, giving you control disguised as loyalty. But kindness alone isn't enough. Knowing when to act and when to wait is the ultimate skill. Let's now explore how timing your moves can maximize impact and solidify your position of power. Have you ever noticed how the right move at the wrong time leads to failure? In the game of power and influence, knowing when to act is just as important as knowing what to do. Machiavelli believed that patience and observation were key to striking at the perfect moment. Acting too early makes you seem desperate, while waiting too long can cause you to lose control. Consider a manager eyeing a promotion. If they push their agenda too soon, they may come off as overly ambitious and alienate senior leaders. However, if they wait until their achievements are undeniable, they position themselves as the natural choice. Similarly, in relationships, someone who wants to ask for a favor waits for a moment when the other person is feeling grateful or indebted, making a yes more likely. Timing isn't about luck, it's about reading situations and people. The key is to observe patiently, identifying moments of vulnerability, opportunity, or emotional high points when your actions will have the most influence. Strike when the target is emotionally or mentally primed to say yes, and your impact multiplies. Machiavelli advised that opportunities rarely announce themselves as they must be anticipated and seized. He likened it to taming a wild river. Act when the tides are in your favor, or risk being swept away. The most effective leaders and manipulators strike when their actions seem inevitable, making resistance futile. Mastering the art of timing gives you the power to shape outcomes in your favor. But while timing is crucial, understanding the fine line between influence and exploitation is equally important. In the next section, we'll explore the ethics of manipulation, influence vs. exploitation, and delve into whether controlling others can ever be morally justified. Is it ever possible to control someone without crossing the line of morality? In a world where influence is often necessary to achieve goals, understanding the fine line between guiding and exploiting others becomes essential. Machiavelli's philosophy teaches that power often demands manipulation. But where does influence stop and exploitation begin? Consider a manager who motivates their team by inspiring a shared vision. They appeal to the team's values and aspirations, creating a sense of purpose that drives performance. This is influence using persuasion to align goals and foster mutual success. On the other hand, imagine another leader who feeds on fear, guilt, and dependence to secure loyalty. Their actions may achieve the desired outcome, but at the cost of their employees' emotional well-being. This is exploitation using manipulation for personal gain, often disregarding the harm it inflicts on others. The key distinction lies in intent and impact. Influence respects autonomy, encouraging others to make choices that align with shared goals. Exploitation, however, robs people of free will, manipulating their emotions or vulnerabilities for selfish purposes. Influence empowers, while exploitation enslaves. But here's the dilemma: what if the end justifies the means? History is filled with leaders who manipulated others for the greater good, believing that a little deceit was necessary to achieve noble goals. Is it ethical to manipulate if the outcome benefits many, or does exploitation, regardless of its intent, always leave a stain on the soul? As we conclude this journey through Machiavelli's strategies, we are left with an unsettling question. In a world where power often dictates success, is true morality ever possible? The answer may not be as simple as it seems. So, are we influencing for good, or are we justifying exploitation in disguise?